Welcome to the third day.
Okay,
See?
ready to go? All right. Good morning. At least here in New Orleans, it's good morning. And we have other people in other places as well. And I'll introduce some of us to you in just a moment. And so this is the third day of our webcast. And we're glad to be doing this. This has been a lot of fun the first 2 days. And this is Lean Talent Systems. I'm Sid Jacobson. I'm the director. And I want to tell you a little bit about my team as well. But these 4 days that we're doing, in case you're just tuning in for the first time, are about moving into the future. We're having a global pandemic. We're having other issues as well. And times are different and strange for people. So we thought we'd come together and share with you a number of things that we can do to really plan and really build the future the way that we would like it to be. So let me introduce my team. On the screen, you'll see Dr. Janine Clark wearing white, and she's waving now. And Janine is an organizational development expert, and she's had years of experience working in government and in other agencies as well. And she's done lots of consulting and lots of coaching. She's also designed and directed 2 MBA programs, and she's been a college professor for many years and has taught at a number of universities. So we're just thrilled to have Janine on our team. She's just been wonderful to work with. And Janine and I have been friends for more than 25 years. So we come together with a lot of experience between us. We also have Paula Anderson Findley, who is waving now. Paula is also an expert in organizational development, and she's also got a lot of expertise in HR, also does coaching. She has a background in healthcare. She's got a background as a corporate officer for a very large corporation, possibly one of the largest import companies in the country, maybe even in the world. And she's done a great deal of government work as well. And again, brings tremendous expertise. And I've known Janine and Paula about the same amount of time, between 25 and 30 years. So we've been great friends and colleagues for a long, long time. We also have Catalin Zaharia. Catalin is saying hi from Bucharest, Romania. Janine is in Washington, D.C., and Paul is in South Florida, and Catalin, of course, is in Europe. Catalin is a psychiatrist by training, but he's also got a lot of experience and background in training in biomechanical engineering, and also in information science. He's also an expert at 6 Thinking Hats method, which is communication and creativity and a lot of other stuff that people have been using in business for a long time. He's also an expert in transactional analysis, which is another communication skills tool. And he brings a great deal of expertise as well. Catalin and I have been working together for over 15 years now. Catalin and I are both trainers in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. If you're not familiar with that, you can browse our website to find out more. It's almost too big a topic to talk about, but NLP is the state of the art in communication and problem solving and helping people be at their very best. So it's something that I've been doing for over 40 years now, and Catalin for a long time. And both Paul and Janine are also expert practitioners of NLP. And that's one of the ways that we all come together. So we bring a lot to this. We've been a great team working together, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to turn it over now to one of them to talk a little bit about me, and then give it back, and I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to do today, and then we'll just jump in. So Paula?
Hi there, everybody. First, I just want to let you know that today I'll be your voice to communicate with Sid. I'm going to have to turn that off. That's an alarm.
Wake up.
If someone could take over, that's a fire alarm, but there is not a fire aboard the vessel. So I'll silence while
All right, Catalin, I know you wanted to talk for a couple of moments as well, so feel free. You're
One of the
muted
things
too.
I know, Sid, is that indeed we started to work together since 2004, I think. And one of the things we did here in our practitioner programs was a great development, and your emphasis is very good on what we know about learning. And learning, especially for you reframe it in a way, and everybody knows about education, but you put it to a new level, which is metacation, with your expertise in helping people to develop their learning strategies. Of course, you launched, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, your latest book in teaching learning, and that's I hope to show to people what are the latest discoveries you have made in way we can improve our learning. So I am excited to see this day today.
Very good. Well, I'm excited too, and glad to be here with all of you as well. So what I'm going to do today is talk about a number of things, and building on what we've been doing for the last 2 days. So Janine on Tuesday was talking a lot about looking to the future as well as looking to the past, and how we develop in organizations and individually. So we're going to be doing some of that today. Also, yesterday, Paula and Tadlin were talking about systems. The systems look at how things work. So I'm going to be doing some of that as well. But I'm going to be tying most of this into our own personal development, the things that we need to do for ourselves. And there are a few things that I'd like to talk about to start with. The first thing is that all of us now are going through some odd times. This is not a normal time for any of us. And because of that, people are challenged in ways that perhaps they haven't been challenged before. So in thinking about that, one of the things that we know is when people are in these situations, they don't think the same way. They don't experience the world the same way. So we're going to be exploring some of those things. And I want to talk about it both from the organizational standpoint and then from the individual standpoint as well, because if we can work on the individuals, that's what affects organizations. Without being able to help people in an organization, we really don't get very far. So one of the things that I know is that everybody probably listening to us has a desire to learn, a desire to improve themselves and to move past where they've been before. So that's important. Also, all of us have some skills and some abilities that we bring to the table. And learning to use those to help ourselves is really crucial. And I wanted to frame this by beginning with a story. And I'm going to tell you several stories today because this is what helps people to learn and helps people to understand the directions that you're going in. So first, I was working with Singapore Airlines a number of years ago. Singapore Airlines has been one of my major clients for a long time, and I worked with them for a number of years in a number of capacities. I did training for cabin crew people, I did training for business office people, and I did a lot of change management training on a regular basis. So how do we change? How do we transform? How do we do things differently? And I've been doing these workshops for several years, and they asked me for something special because we were doing a 3-day course, and I was doing it several times a year regularly. Their IT department ran into some trouble. They were in the midst of a major overhaul of their system. And IT in an airline includes everything from ticketing to managing the business office communication, you name it. It's a big deal. So they had 200 people working in this department, and they were going crazy. And by the way, I do have their permission to talk about this. They don't mind it. The reason they were going crazy was because they hadn't planned it well. They knew they needed to make the change. They knew that they needed to upgrade everything. Everybody in the department was on board with the upgrade. So there was no resistance to the change, which you obviously often run into in organizations. That wasn't the case this time. Everybody was on board, but they were going out of their minds. And the reason they were going out of their minds was because they hadn't thought through everything they needed to think through to design the change. They just tried to flip a switch and have it happen. And this is something that Janine mentioned the other day. Sometimes you can just flip a switch and move forward, but sometimes it takes a lot of work. Well, they had not done a very good job at this. And their people were going crazy, and they knew it, and they knew it was their fault, and they wanted some help. So they asked me to just do a 2-day version of my change workshop with folks. So they wanted to break them up into classes of 25, so that was perfect. So we did 8 classes of 25 people for 2 days, and help them in whatever way possible. They said, look, you're the expert. You know what to do. You know our people. Come on in, help them. So the first morning I walked in with the first class and looked around, and these people were exhausted. You could see it 100 miles away. And they were sullen, and their morale was as low as it could possibly be. And this didn't take, a lot of skill in noticing things on my part. It was obvious. So I started just talking to them. I said, you guys look like you're really in a lot of distress here. And they said, oh, it's been terrible. We really need some help. And I said, well, tell me what's changed. And they were like, oh, you wouldn't believe it. It's all this different stuff. And I said, okay, so let's focus on that a little bit. And they decided that I should talk to this one person in the room, this one woman who was really under stress. They wanted me to help her right away. And I said, sure. So I turned to her and I said, what's changed? And she says, everything has changed. I said, well, okay. So you're in a new office. And she said, no, the office is the same. Oh, okay. A new boss. She said, no, same boss. New colleagues. She said, a couple of, people we've kind of shifted. Well, no, we all know each other. No, it's not really new colleagues. I said, okay. New hours. No, not new hours either. A different pay structure? She said, no, they didn't change that. And I kept going, 4 or 5 more obvious things, and the answer was the same every time. No, that's not changed. That's no. And I watched her and the entire room calm down, and it was wonderful to see. And I said, when I'd run out of guesses at what had changed, I just looked at her and I said, so what has changed? She says, well, we have a new operating system for IT. And I went, I said, and is that difficult? She says, well, it's just, we're just trying to, get through it and everything. I said, so what you're saying is you haven't learned the new operating system yet. She went, right. And everybody was, yeah, that's it. Right. And I said, I asked the most obvious question in the world. Remember, I'm talking to IT professionals. These people live, eat, and breathe computers. They have been for years. I said, have any of you ever had to learn a new operating system before? And of course, this is what we do. We have to learn new operating systems all the time. I said, right. So how long does that usually take? They said, usually about 4 months. And during that time, we'll be okay. At the end of that time, we'll know what we're doing and things will go smoothly. I said, right. So how long has it been since you changed? And they said, well, about 6 weeks. I said, so not enough time. They went, oh, right. I said, so what you need to do is learn the new operating system. And they said, well, yeah, but there's one more problem as well. I said, well, so what is it? They said, we're all making lots and lots of mistakes. Stuff we used to do every day with no trouble. We're making all kinds of mistakes. And I went, And they went, well, what does that mean? I said, it doesn't mean anything. And they looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, let me explain to you how learning works. We talk about, and this is called the Bandura curve. Albert Bandura is a very famous psychologist. been around for many years. And he identified these stages many years ago. So there are 4 stages that we go through to really learn something well. The first stage we call unconscious incompetence. This is where you don't know about something and you can't do it. So let me give you a simple example. You were learning to ride a bike when you were very young. There was some point when you were young and you didn't even know what a bicycle was. You'd never seen one before. So at that point, you certainly couldn't ride one. And you didn't even know you couldn't ride one because you didn't even know about it. So you were unconscious about bicycles and you couldn't ride one. Well, that's easy. You don't know. It's out of sight, out of mind. But then at some point, you saw someone riding a bicycle. You looked out your window or you went outside and somebody went by on a bicycle and you went, whoa, cool. I want to do that. So now you're conscious about bicycles. And you know it's something you want to do, but you don't know how. So this is what we call conscious incompetence. You consciously know something you want to do and you know how to do it. So after a while, somebody gets you a bike, they put you on the bike, they run around with you, and hopefully you don't run into too many trees or whatever, and you start to learn. And you can probably all remember this stage where you're learning and you can kind of do it, but it takes all the focus of your attention. As psychologists, we talk about something called attentional units. It's a theoretical concept. It's not like we have a certain number in our head, but there's only so many things we can pay attention to. And we can only divide our attention between so many things before we just run out of space in the attention box. So what happens is while you're in that learning part, that part of the learning cycle, and you're in that stage of learning, you can ride the bike as long as you fully pay attention to it, but you can't do anything else. That sort of passes as you get more and more practice. But during that time, it's hard for you to do other things at the same time. What eventually will happen is you'll get to the point where riding a bike is natural. Like we all say, you don't even forget it, right? You haven't ridden a bike for many years, you get on one and it's fine, you can do it. That's the stage that we call unconscious competence. That's where you can do it and you don't have to pay any attention to it at all. You don't have to think about it. And so you can ride a bike and, you know, drink a Coke and talk to your friend and look at the horizon and the surroundings and everything else. Hopefully, if you live where I live, you're watching out for buses and crazy people. But it's that stage where things become automatic. Now, the difficulty comes in when you're in that conscious competence stage because your attention is partly divided, mostly on what you're doing. So Bandura's example that he used to give is of a small child learning to walk. So let's say you have a baby and he's in ballpark 10 months old, somewhere around there, maybe a little younger, maybe a little bit older. But that's about the time they start learning to walk. So they've learned to crawl by that time. They start off usually creeping and then they can crawl, and they can crawl around real fast. But then they start to walk and they can kind of stand up and hold on a little bit and they're holding on real tight, but then they can take a few steps and they can start to walk a little bit on their own. Maybe they can take 4 or 5 steps without holding on. So they're starting to get it. But this is about the time when they start learning language. They start learning to talk. They know a few words. So what some parents have noticed, and this doesn't happen with all babies, but it happens with enough, the babies will start to talk and they'll go back to crawling. And usually the parents will freak out and go, oh, my poor baby, he knew how to walk before and now he's completely forgotten what's the matter with my child. And there isn't anything wrong. It's that literally they can't walk and talk at the same time because it takes too many attentional units. They have to either walk or talk. After a while, they'll get good enough at each of them so they can do them together. They don't need that much attention on them. Same thing with riding the bike. Same thing with these poor beleaguered IT professionals I was talking to. And I explained this to them, and I said, it's natural that you're making mistakes because you were consciously competent at some of these other tasks. And now, because you're spending so much time learning the new operating system, you don't have enough attention on those tasks, and that's where you're making mistakes. It's a natural process. And they said, whoa, what a relief. You never saw so much relief in a room in your entire life. But then their question is, well, what do we do about it? And it's the easiest answer in the world. Nothing. It's a problem that solves itself. It just takes practice and learning with the things that you're doing, and it goes away. And you stop making the mistakes. And pretty soon you can operate the new operating system and the old one just as well as each other. So thinking about this story, thinking about this example, and by the way, I had all these other classes as well. Some of them I wasn't getting to until more than 4 months later. They hardly needed me at that time because they had learned the operating system. Everything was fine. So this is a natural process. And thinking about this, I always think about what is it that people need when they're changing, when they're developing themselves, when they're transforming into something else. And there are a number of things. So we'll talk about this sometimes in slides, sometimes not. I'm going to take you through some exercises as well. But what I'd like you to do is take a look at this for a moment, and I will hide this for now so that you can see this. And let's talk about some of the things that we have to be able to do when we're talking about creating and managing change. So what are the things that are important? Well, there's 3 essential things that people will need to make any kind of transformation, any kind of evolution, any kind of change. A lot of the changes that we make in our lives, if you think about it, are going to happen all by themselves. We don't have to focus or concentrate or work. They just happen. We just do them. But when doing it on purpose, there's some things that we need. The first thing that we need is we've got to have motivation, means, and opportunity. Sounds like an old cop show on TV. How did that criminal do it? Well, he had motivation, means, and opportunity. So motivation is why. You got to have a good reason. The means is how. You have to have tools, skills, resources, support. And the opportunity is the chance. So you think about these folks at Singapore Airlines, they had motivation. They knew they needed to upgrade their system. They had the means. They knew how to do it. They had all the stuff in place. They were experts. It's considered by almost everyone to be the finest airline in the world. And they get most things right, but they're not perfect. So they had the motivation, the means without any trouble. They needed the opportunity. They needed more of a chance. They needed more time. And they also needed to know, while this was going on, that they were safe enough to do it because they were scared. They didn't know if they were going to get in trouble because they were making mistakes, but mistakes are part of the process of that new thing. So when they knew they were safe enough, they kind of dove in and kept going. And things turned out okay. Now, the other thing that needs to happen, and this is why I mentioned I'd seen them several months later and things were working really well, is for change to last, for any transformation to stick, it needs to be self-reinforcing, which is a fancy way of saying it needs to work. It needs to be something that's better than whatever you had before, otherwise you go back. So it's a natural process. If you make a change and it doesn't work out, you're going to go back to what you were doing before. But if the new thing that you're doing is self-reinforcing, it's going to keep you rolling. It's going to keep you going in the direction that you want to go. So what are the things that people run into? What are the difficulties when people are trying to change? Well, I believe there are these 4 key tasks during any major change event, any kind of a transformation, any kind of something where you're shifting to a new reality, which a lot of us are going through right now. The first thing is you need to keep track of the important relationships. Most of us don't work in a vacuum. And if you're working with other people, or at least if you're having to respond to customers or other key players or people in your organization, or even just people who are watching what you do, if you work by yourself, you have to manage the relationships. And people sometimes forget about this. They get too focused, right? And so this is something that we know. I don't think I need to dwell on this a lot. In NLP, we spend a lot of time giving people the skills of managing relationships, but that's a bigger topic. We have to ensure that communication is clear and it's thorough. That's the only way to maintain these relationships. It's the only way to make sure that things work the way that they're supposed to work. Next, we have to promote learning. A lot of people have trouble making changes because they've got to learn a lot of stuff real fast. Learning needs to be intentional, and it needs to be focused on the essentials. If you can't do that, you're going to run into trouble. And people who have difficulty learning are going to always have trouble making changes, because part of that process is this. What do I have to do new? What's the next thing I have to do? Do I know how to do that? If I don't know, can I learn how to do it? And finally, we've got to make good decisions. And the only way to make good decisions is to be in our very best state of mind. And getting into our best states of mind is a number of webinars and workshops and books and things as well. But I'm going to do some of that with you today anyway. We're just going to do some of these things very quickly. So right now, I'm going to give you a moment, and we'll just take a minute to do this. I want you to think back in your mind. Think about something that you're very, very good at. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. But something that you feel you're very competent at, you're very capable, you're very good at it. And just choose one, but choose one that when you learned how to do it, it was an enjoyable learning experience. So something that was fun to learn. Because I want you to go back in your mind now, just for a minute or so, to that time and that place where you learned to do the thing that you're very good at. And be in that experience again, looking out your own eyes, seeing what you were seeing at the time, hearing whatever sounds are there. And usually in a learning experience, there's somebody there teaching or guiding or demonstrating something. And so if there's somebody like that, focus on that person. And as you're seeing what you see and hearing what you're hearing, feel what it's like inside. Feel what it's like to be learning this new thing. You might even notice if there was some moment during this learning experience when your mind opened up in some way, where your mind went open enough to take in new information so that it went smoothly for you. Open like children's minds are open. And feel what that's like. What's it like to have your mind open up like that? And just enjoy it for a few more moments. If it was fun back then, it could be fun again now. And pay attention to how this feels. Notice this feeling and hold on to it for a few minutes while we talk. And open your eyes if they were closed and come back. And let's talk about what we just did. Because what we're talking about here are states of mind. So this is the part where we go from thinking about patients to thinking about ourselves. What can we do to make ourselves capable at whatever we need to do? And one of the first things we need to do when we're making big changes is we need to learn something new. So let's take a look at what states of mind are all about. Okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit
for a minute.
Yeah.
Sid, I'd like to interrupt and ask you, could you please click your camera on?
Yeah, I did. I just did it again. Yeah,
Okay,
that's better. Some people like it better if my camera's off. People have been asking me for years, please turn off your camera.
Thanks.
So we're talking about states of mind. Thanks, Paula. We're talking about states of mind. And here are a couple things that everybody knows. Everybody knows that if we're in a particular state of mind that works, you know what? I'm going to turn my camera back off, Paula, because there's a conflict between the camera and the slides. So we'll just have to have me in the dark for a few minutes. Let's see if it's working again now.
You've got a great voice.
Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to have to do for a moment is stop the slideshow and start it again. So let's do that and see if it works better. And we'll see in just a second. Sorry about that, folks. That worked really well earlier. Let's It's one of those things that happens when you're
I don't
live.
think I don't think anybody can notice, but there is a little smoke after the fire alarm.
It's coming out of my ears, I think. Let's see if the share is working. Here we go. Okay, yeah, this is one of the things we've noticed on our platform is sometimes things slow down pretty severely. So I'm just going to move this out of the way a little bit so I can get to it, because I think that may be part of the problem. And we'll see if I can turn my camera back on at the same time and see if it works this time. And no.
It's working for us seeing you and the slide.
Yeah, but I can't get the slide to operate.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to start it again. I really apologize for this.
Not a problem. We're standing by, and if it doesn't work, I can always take over on the slides.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna talk while I do this because that'll save us a little bit of time. So, one of the things that we know is all of us have experienced being in states of mind that work for us and states of mind that don't work. So we all know there are days when we're having really good days and other days when things aren't working for us at all, like now. And part of that is about our state of mind, because we all know that if we're doing something really, really well, sometimes it's because we're just in the right state of mind. Paul, I'm going to ask you to take over the slides. This is completely broken.
I got you, Sid. It's going to take me a minute, and I'll pull it up.
All right.
Go ahead and go to your
Well, I'll
view.
talk about this a bit, and
okay.
And you guys can look at me. So one of the things that we know about slides is that they don't always work when the video's on. At least we're discovering that now. So you all know that when you're in the right state of mind, you're more capable of things. So Paula, you can just advance that slide all the way to the end if you want. So our capabilities in many ways are dependent on our state of mind. Our state of mind is controlled by usually one of three things. Either things that we see outside of us or hear, so some event that happens, which all of us are being inundated with now. If you turn on the news, it will affect your state of mind pretty strongly. And if you, let's see, am I still sharing? No. Are you sharing, Paula?
I'll be right with you in a minute.
Okay, good. So one of the things that we know is if we're not in a good state of mind, we're not as capable. So something we see on television in the morning that upsets us will upset our state of mind, and that can last us the whole day. So dealing with our state of mind is very, very important. And there are three things that control it. The things that happen outside of it, but also the way that we use our memory and the way that we use our imagination. And I'm going to do a couple things with you on both of those today as we're doing this. So I just asked you to go to a memory when you learn something really well so that you could go into a good learning state. Learning states are crucial when we're trying to do anything new. When we're trying to learn something new. If we're in a really good learning state, it makes it much easier. So Paula, you can just advance that slide all the way through. There's animation in each slide. So we know this, and we know that when we're talking about managing ourselves, a lot of times we're talking about managing our state. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Paula. Thank you. So when we're talking about making a change, one of the things that we have to manage is our state. The other thing that we have to manage are some natural tendencies. So you can go ahead and advance this slide all the way too. There's a struggle that goes on in all of us anytime we have to make a change between keeping things the way that they are and making a change. And this is built into us, deep into our genetic makeup. If we haven't been to someplace new before, there's automatically a risk. So there's some part of us that goes, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to go there. Maybe I'll never be heard from again, right? But at the same time, we also have a need to go explore. That's what human beings do. We explore. And just watch a little kid, they explore all the time. So there's this balance. How much do we want to explore? How much do we want to hold ourselves back? So I'll tell you a quick story. My friend Richard Bandler is one of the people who developed neurolinguistic programming, NLP. And he was talking with a woman one day named Virginia Satir. Virginia is one of the people who invented family psychotherapy. She was the first practicing family therapist in the world that we know of. And Richard posed an interesting question to Virginia. He said, Virginia, as counselors, as therapists, people often come to us because they need to make big changes. And a lot of times, if they don't make big changes quickly, they could die. People are in life-threatening situations. For example, people who are abused, people who work in very, very dangerous, unnecessarily dangerous jobs, people who don't take care of their health. All of these things are life-threatening situations. And he said, and sometimes it's really difficult to get these people to even accept the idea of changing. And I don't understand that. He said, I would think that survival, this instinct we have inside to survive, would take over and just kick in, and we would be able to automatically make these changes when we're in a life-threatening situation. I mean, every animal wants to preserve itself. So I don't understand why our natural instincts don't kick in when it's time to make a big change and we're in trouble. So I don't understand these clients. Isn't survival the strongest drive in human beings? And Virginia said, no, Richard, it isn't. Strongest drive in human beings is to do what's familiar over and over and over again. With some people, up to the point that it kills them. For some people, change is so difficult, it's so scary, they are so stuck that they can't even think about changing. So go ahead to the next slide, Paula. Thanks.
Sid, I think
yes.
we have a comment that
Yes.
that fits in beautifully right here. And the
Okay.
comment is, these frames of learning do make me think of all that could be done to help us move forward in the areas of conflicts, for example, between police, our judicial system, people of color, and the disenfranchised. And because of the approach that we're in right now and the kinds of things you're talking about, expecting people to change isn't working. So this is so relevant to what you're sharing with us.
Thank you for that comment. I think so too. This is advance to the next slide, and I'll talk about that in terms of what's on the slide, because this is so relevant right now, and it's absolutely true. We have this struggle between keeping things the same and making changes. Familiarity is the strongest drive people move toward, right? And cognitive dissonance is what people move away from. So cognitive dissonance is, if you're not familiar with the term, it comes from 1960s social psychology, but it essentially means you're in a situation and your understanding, your expectations, the way that you understand the situation should work is not happening. And when it's not happening, you become very, very confused. When we're in familiar situations, we feel safe, because when we're in a familiar situation, we feel like we understand it. It's clear to us. We feel safe because, at least we perceive that we're safe, because we know how it works. And that makes us feel comfortable. When I used to talk to abused women that I work with, some of the ones who really didn't want to change would tell me things like, I understand how my situation works. I know when I'm in trouble. I can read the signs. I can see what's going to happen. And because I understand it, I feel safe. Because I feel safe, I'm comfortable enough not to have to change my situation. If you talk to someone who works in a very unnecessarily dangerous job, where I live, there's lots of oil and chemical companies around here. Most of those plants are very, very well run. Some of them not so much. And the ones that aren't well run, I've talked to some of these people, and they tell you the same thing. It's okay. I understand this place. I know the signs. I know the signals. As long as I can understand, I feel safe. As long as I feel safe, I'm comfortable. I can stay here. For these people, the threat of going to the new is too confusing for them. It seems too dangerous. So when we're talking about a societal change, especially, or a group of people changing, or an organization. We're talking about mobilizing everybody so that they can deal with those feelings of confusion and danger. People who manage change well, now listen closely, people who manage change well, people who are able to do this, are people who have found a way to be able inside to deal with the confusion, to deal with the sense of danger, or the awkwardness, or the strangeness, or the odd way relationships work, or communication. Anything that it is that makes them uncomfortable, they can deal with that long enough to stay with it until it becomes familiar. And that's the secret. There are some people whose discomfort becomes so strong that they can't do it. They can't deal with it. They can't handle it. So this is one of the things that we need to be aware of in people, because it doesn't mean that they're bad people or there's something wrong with them if they don't want to make a change. It just means that there's something inside of them that's scaring them too much. So I think we can all recognize that now. And people who don't want things to change are people who are scared. They're afraid they're going to lose something, or that they have lost something. They've lost their power, or they've lost their income, or they've lost whatever it might be, so they don't want to change. Out on the streets, protesters are looking for change. These are people who want things to get better because they've lost something as well. And people who don't want things to change maybe have a safer environment that they built for themselves. Their familiarity is comfortable. It works for them, but it doesn't work for everybody. So these are natural things that we have inside of us that are genetically programmed in. If you think about our evolution as human beings, cavemen had a natural tendency to go out into the wilderness too, but if they didn't do it in groups, they might not come back. And so that's how tribes got developed. And our tribe's going to go out here, but there's that other tribe over there. We've got to watch out for them. This is how it developed, and it's natural. It doesn't mean that people are bad. It just means that they haven't found a way to feel safe. So what happens is, when people start to make changes that aren't safe, they bounce right back. They go back to what's familiar with them, for them, and they won't stay with the new long enough to try it out. That's why change in societies goes so slow. Some of us think it's just glacially slow, and sometimes it is, because we don't know a way to get everybody to feel safe. But then something like a pandemic comes along. I don't know if any of you saw one of the memes going around the internet, and it said, oh, so you don't want to take care of the environment. You don't want to learn to pollute less. You don't want to live more sustainably. Here's a virus practice. Because what a virus does is it doesn't care how comfortable you are. If you don't change, you're going to be in trouble. So we've been forced into changing a number of things that we do, even simple things like going to restaurants or being with people that we care about, or even the way that we work. Many of us, the way that we work. So even doing this, I'm used to training people in a room together. So these are things that are forced on us. So what do we have to do? We have to find a way to make ourselves comfortable with the new things, which means all the stuff we were talking about before. We have to manage the relationships, we have to manage the learning, we have to manage the communication, and we have to be able to make good decisions. And the only way to do that is to manage our states of mind. So this brings me to another story I wanted to tell you. I had a friend years ago whose name was Deanne Stark. Deanne was a brilliant therapist, absolutely amazing, very, very creative. Unfortunately, she's no longer alive. She died many, many years ago. But I got to talk to her one time about how she did some of what she did in her practice. And she came up with something that was so simple. It was so simple. She had an intake form, like most therapists would. And if you would come to see her, she would hand you a form on a clipboard, and you'd fill out name and address and all your basic contact information, a few other things that she wanted to know from you. And then you'd flip it over on the back. And on the back, there were 3 short essay questions. And the first one was, what talent, skill or ability are you most proud of? What talent, skill, or ability gives you pride that you think has been helpful for you in your life? And people would write down a couple of sentences. They didn't have to write a lot. Second question was, what is the greatest accomplishment you've ever made? The accomplishment that gives you the most pride, the most satisfaction, something that was a big achievement for you. Then write me a few sentences about that. And the third one was, what's the biggest change you've ever successfully made? Tell me about that. So people would write these things down. And then she would come into her waiting room, have the person come into the office with them. They'd hand the clipboard back. She'd look at the front, make sure everything was all taken care of. Then she'd turn it over on the back and look at it and start reading what they'd written. And she would go, wow, you can do this. You have this talent, this skill, that's amazing. You've accomplished this in your life. You made this change. Most people can't make that change. You are a really powerful person. You're able, you're skilled, you can do this. So in doing that, what was she doing? She was getting people to gather their resources. And that's what this is about. It's about gathering the resources that we need. And if we can do that, we can make good decisions. We can manage the stress that comes from making changes. We can help the other people around us. We can get ourselves into a state where we can communicate at our very best and maybe be more influential with those people that find it more difficult to change. So there's a couple things I'd like to point out, because we're talking about changing other people as well here. If we're talking about changing another group of people especially, or if you're in an organization where you're trying to get people to change because they have to, there's a couple of things that you'll need. One is you'll need to make sure that they have their own motivation for changing. Not your motivation, their motivation. Anybody who's worked in large organizations knows if you're at the top and you give people orders, that's not enough of a motivation for people to do it well. They may follow your orders, but they may not follow them very well. They may not understand how to do them well. They may not have any ownership of those instructions. So we have to help people understand why, for them, these orders matter. Why, for them, this change matters. Why, for them, doing something different, expending energy in a new way is going to be good for them. That's the first thing. So we have to help people get motivated. We have to show them how, give them the means, to give them the opportunity. We have to help them feel safe. And if we're at our very best, we'll be at our most influential. Again, that's a whole series of workshops, but trust me, if we can get ourselves into our very best states, we come across to people much more differently. I think everyone watching this understands that. So once we do that, we're more influential with the people around us. It doesn't mean they'll buy everything that we have to offer to them all the time, but we'll have a much better chance of getting them to do that. We'll also usually, if we're in those very good states, be better listeners as well. And this is where the communication skills come in. The other thing that we can do for people is we can help them understand that we understand the change might not be easy for them. Change isn't easy for some people. Now, those of you that understand different personality styles, if you've looked at Myers-Briggs or DISC or any of the other instruments out there, if you've ever used these in a company, some personality styles love change, and some personality styles are afraid of change. They're much slower to change. They're much more careful. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to present it to them differently. And once again, that's something we could help you with. I don't have all the time to talk about that today, but it's something that you're probably aware of. We've all known people who are very, very slow to change. And if you think about it, they're usually very, very, very careful to make sure that everything is taken care of so nothing can go wrong. And that's fine. There's another group that tend to be slow to change because they're worried about everyone else changing as well. So these are the folks that want everybody to come along together. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, you have to present what you want to do to them in those terms to make it comfortable for them. That's what will work. So let's go to the next slide again, Paul, if you can, and let's talk a little bit about how to do these things on our own too, because I'm going to take you through several ways to do this that can be useful for you personally. Because I think that if there's something new that you have to do, it's a lot easier if you take a systematic approach to it. Okay, can we see that slide? Are you still sharing?
Would you
All right,
like
very good. Thanks.
Would you like the whole slide
Yes,
up
you
at
can give the whole
once?
slide. Yes, you can do that this time. That'll
Okay,
be
give me a
fine.
minute then. And then if you could just address, while I'm pulling that up, if
Yes.
you could just address another comment around, and this is, it goes to what you were saying. It's a comment from a participant that's saying, you know, now we have people like protesters with a desire for community. So you're sharing with us individual change and then how to help others change in community.
Right.
So if you could just help us integrate that a little bit, and I'll get the steps up.
I'm going to get deeply psychological with you for a moment, because this is something, again, people have written books and books and books about this. There's the way that we developed as a society is through trade in this sense. Go back to cavemen, and one cave person has some meat and the other cave person has some fruit. They figured out they could share with each other. So it all comes down to sharing. And if they can do that, then both of them have both fruit and meat. It's the simplest, most crude description of how commerce began. As groups, we all know that we're more powerful, we're safer, we're more nurtured, we're more nourished if we can do it in community than not. In fact, there are some schools of therapy, especially people who work with addicts, will say that people get well in community. They probably got sick in community, now they can get well in community as well. Because there are many things that we can't do on our own. The issue here is that we have several different communities. We can't think of any country as having one community. Shoot, here in New Orleans, we have so many different communities, it's amazing. Anyone who's ever come here can't understand why we have so many different accents. They go, where did all these people come from? Well, we've got a whole bunch of them here in town. Different neighborhoods, people don't even sound the same. But they can come together at certain times. There are some things that people will always come together around. Anything that's deeply emotional. If they share the emotion. The problem now is that people don't share the same emotion. They may share the feeling of outrage, but it's aimed at different things. Some people are outraged at things that have happened that are bad. Other people are outraged that people think those things are wrong instead of right, or who to blame, or who we should be looking at. So what you end up with is a lot of people blaming each other. So everybody's outraged and they're pointing fingers at each other, rather than looking at the system that we're in, the whole community, which is where the evolution needs to happen. And this comes through education, exposure. And I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I used to live in Singapore. And Singapore is a very interesting place. It's very different from the United States. It's a polar opposite in a number of ways. One of them is size. Singapore is the size of Los Angeles, the whole country. So it's much easier to run. It's also successfully multicultural. And that's not to say that there isn't prejudice there, because there is some. But there are Chinese, there are Indians, there are Malaysians, there are other groups as well. There's a strong Arab population there. Then there's a little India. It's a sort of an Indian community. There's an Arab town that's a more Arab community that has mosques, and the Indian one has Indian temples. And there's a lot of Christian churches. It's a very Christian country as well. And then there's Chinese. So there's a lot of Buddhists. So there's a lot of religious community. There's a lot of different art. There's some different architecture. Now most of the architecture is just modern. What they've come together around are things like education and commerce, so that they work together. If you look at the parliament, it's filled with all these different folks. It's a very racially and ethnically diverse. It's even diverse in terms of income as well. So they've managed to get past many of the problems that other places have. Part of that is because they're small, but part of it is because they've learned to live together and support each other around the idea of this is our country, we want it to be good for everybody. And I think most people in this country want it to be good for everybody too. They just don't always know how that works because they haven't been exposed to other people. There are parts of this country where people, there you go to towns and there are hardly any non-white people. And there are other places that are heavily non-white. And so there are these different groups that haven't really mixed the way that they have in a place like Singapore. They've stayed separate within the same place. People used to call America a melting pot. Nobody's ever really melted. We just kind of put people in different places. And those are the things that need to change. Some of that's done through legislation. Most of it's done through education. You can only legislate so much, but you have to get people to understand, and that comes through experience, the direct experience of being with other people. And unfortunately, sometimes that only happens when we're in the middle of a crisis. So we've got a couple of crises going on now. We've got the pandemic itself, which is a virus that isn't anybody's fault. And then there's this other crisis that's going on now that everybody's blaming each other. And it's a systemic problem. We need to blame the system, not the individual people in it. And that's the part that needs to be fixed. So here's what I'd like to do.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
We just had a great comment from one of our participants that this cognitive dissonance and discomfort could actually be a good warning buzz for ourselves to enhance our attention and collect more information. Sort of a positive action in response to that discomfort.
I don't think I could have said it any better. It's a wonderful,
It came from one of our participants. I don't take credit for it.
And let's think for a moment how many of us are living that way now because our lives are not what they normally were. So we're living in some cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance, when it goes on for a period of time, creates physical stress. It's one of the reasons that everybody in the medical community is saying, get out and exercise, get fresh air, pay attention to your diet. Don't gain 35 pounds just because you're locked in your house. Get out and do something. Take care of yourself physically, because that's the way that most people notice it. They notice it physically. Some people just notice that they're frustrated. They notice it emotionally. But all these things can be dealt with, and they're dealt with by the states that we go in. So what I'd like to do is take you through a little process that's going to put together some of what we've been talking about. So in talking about this, it's going to rely on you being able to manage your state of mind, right? And I think most of us having this discussion, we're in a pretty good state of mind now, at least from the comments I'm hearing, people are really into this and they're paying attention. So the first part is to manage your state of mind. Now, here's the second thing, and I'm going to ask you to do this again on your own for a moment. So if you can, if you're in a good place to do this, close your eyes and sit back in your chair for a moment. And I'm going to ask you to do the following. I want you to think about something in the future that you would like. This could be a goal. It could be some kind of a change that you've successfully made. It could be being just in a different place or a different situation than you're in right now. So think about that for a moment and see if you can get it clearly in mind. And what I'd like you to do is imagine that that future is located way out in front of you. And I want you to imagine that you can just like magically float in that direction. And I want you to go into the future, and I want you to go far enough so that you know absolutely at that point you will have accomplished this. So even if it's 20 years in the future, go 21 years. So you're floating into the future to a place where you absolutely know, beyond doubt, you will have achieved this, or you will have gotten to this place, or you will have made this change. And allow yourself to experience what it's like there. What do you see? What are you saying to yourself in your mind about this? And how does it feel? Does it feel right? Does it feel the way that you think it should feel? The way that resonates in your body, where you just know, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be doing. This is what I need to have achieved. And I want you to imagine from there, from that place in the future, where you are where you want to be, I want you to imagine that you can sort of turn back around and look back at today, at the present. So you can see all that space, all that life that happened between today in June of 2020 and that time where you are in the future. And here's what I want you to explore. What resources did you have or pick up along the way that allowed you to get to that place in the future? And it doesn't matter what they are, just imagine. They can be resources inside you, could be knowledge or understanding or a particular state, maybe courage, maybe focus, maybe drive, perseverance. Notice also, if you can, what steps took you to that place where you are now from June of 2020. What activities did you do? What did you actually have to do in your behavior to get there, to make that happen? And just notice that. Next, what beliefs did you have or did you pick up along the way that got you to that place in the future? What did you believe about possibility? What did you believe about yourself? What did you believe about other people, the environment that you're in? And finally, who helped you along the way? What allies did you have on this path? Or which ones did you find or pick up along the way that helped you? So I want you to imagine now that you can gather all that together and keep it in your mind and come back and bring it with you back to now, today, June 4th, 2020, and bring yourself back to the present with all of that. All those people, all those skills, all those resources you picked up along the way. and all those beliefs. And then if your eyes are closed, open your eyes and bring yourself back to the present, being here on June 4th in 2020. Okay. So a number of things may have happened for you. Hopefully some of you had the full experience of getting to that place. Some people watching and listening to this may have had some difficulty at some part of that process. Some of you may have had difficulty even identifying what the goal should be. Sometimes if people are feeling upset, depressed, confused, in cognitive dissonance, it's hard to even clearly see a good goal. And this is where the step of getting yourself into a really good state first can help. And there are a number of states that are useful. And so just for a minute, I want to talk about the last one that I'm not going to take you through right now. This is something for you to do on your own. And it's what we call a state of being congruent, a state of congruence. Congruence means everything inside you is working together. Everything's in balance. Everything inside says, yes, I'm ready. Some people, when I tell them that, they say, well, I've never had that before. But we know that that's not true. Everyone's had that before at some point. Maybe when you were very young. I was talking the other night doing a webinar for people in China, and I was talking about a great niece of ours who's now 4. She just turned 4 days ago. And this child is congruent. She always knows what she wants. She always feels she can do it, she can have it, she's capable of it. She always is directed, even if she's playing, even if she's pretending. And it's fun to watch her too, because she'll say things like, I'm going to Las Vegas, out of the blue. And she has a knapsack and she's got a suitcase and a teddy bear or something with her, and she's ready to go. And she goes to the front door to wait for her ride. She's completely, fully congruent. And she did this the other day at her birthday party, and some people came in who were late, and they looked at her and said, oh, you're taking a trip? She was pretending, but for her it wasn't pretend, it was real. And it was so real that it came across to everyone else. This is one of the things that will take us through anything that we have to get through. That state of congruence. A friend of mine calls it the state of perfection. I don't know that I agree with the word, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's that state where you absolutely know that what you're doing is right, and you feel completely confident about it, and you don't need to fight about it, you don't need to argue about it, and in most cases, you don't even need to convince anyone else. You just know, this is who I am, this is where I'm going. So this is the steps for me in taking ourselves from where we are now into the future. Janine the other day talked about this. She said people in business now, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article, we're talking about going to the future and looking back to see what they needed. Well, this is something I've been doing with people for 30 years. This is standard neuro-linguistic programming. And we can do it in a way that makes it real for people. And I hope it was real for you guys. I've also prepared a one-page summary of this. It's sort of a guide. So if this is an exercise you'd like to do again, you can watch the video later on YouTube. It will be there. And follow my instructions along and follow along with the sheet. If you feel like you don't need that, you can just use the sheet. All you need to do is send us a quick email and we'll bounce it right back to you. You have our email at info@leantalentsystems.com. It's been on all the slides, but it's just info@leantalentsystems.com, and we'll be happy to send you back that sheet. And you could probably do this on your own at this point. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I apologize again for the slides getting a little wonky, but at least we were able to look at them and get them somewhere with them. So I appreciate you all listening, and We'll be doing more of these in the future. Tomorrow, we're going to have another seminar, and I'm going to hand this over for a few minutes to Janine and to Paula and to Catalin to talk about what's coming up tomorrow and what other things that we have for you that we can offer. So take it away, team.
Thank you, Sid. What a great session. I'm Janine Clark and part of the Lean Talent Systems team. And I was with you, if you were here with us all 3 days so far, I was here on day 1. And I just wanted to provide a very brief recap to reference what we'll be doing tomorrow, because we're hoping that you will join us tomorrow for our panel discussion. So in day 1, we looked at why this is an optimal time and context for you to chart your new reality through growth and what you can do to support your own growth and also support the growth of others. So whether you're a manager, a leader, an individual, someone who's active in your community. And then in day 2, Catalin and Paula went to look at systems, including organizational systems, but it also applied to family systems and community systems, and how individuals respond to different challenges for growth. And then Sid today really focused in on how we as individuals can leverage our own resources for learning and for growing by activating the states that we can get into and by really working with ourselves, all the resources we have within ourselves. So tomorrow we're going to do a brief presentation and synthesize a few of these things, but we would like to invite you to send in some questions or comments for things that you would like to add to the dialogue and the panel discussion tomorrow. So again, the address info@leantalentsystems.com. And we really hope that those of you who've been listening live and those of you who've been listening on YouTube will send us some comments of things that you would like to push this conversation forward. Obviously, Sid, Paula, Catalin, and myself, we all feel very passionate about our work and about the power of our combined work. That's why we felt just compelled to develop this seminar series, and certainly why we came together to work as a team as Lean Talent Systems. So if you would be willing to send us a few comments, questions, ideas, and feel free to go to our website of leantalentsystems.com and look a little bit more closely at the things we do, and you'll see why this is so relevant to our work and why we are so passionate about it. And we want to thank you for your participation. This wouldn't have been the same without those of you who were participating both live on our platform here and some of you live through our stream on YouTube, and the comments that some of you have provided on YouTube when you reviewed it after the session. I'm just going to give my colleagues, Paula and Catalin, a chance to chime in.
Thank you, Janine, Sid, and for everyone listening. I have one more comment that came up after Sid walked us through our personal journey into creating our future. And the comment, I think, sums it up really lovely. What a powerful process for me, the part of identifying allies that I could reach out to for support for my journey. That is what I have not done in my attempts at this change in the past.
I would like
That's really
to,
interesting. Go ahead, Catalin.
I would like to say that obviously those type of work with ourselves and change is very powerful. also when we know exactly where your areas of development. And working with talent development is important to use and to know this kind of work, which is not only about the techniques and the management tools and the engineering, but how to work with the human mind. And here we have plenty of instruments with whom to look in more details and how everybody can individualize their own work for stress, for working with teams in communication, where to, in general, to enhance the potential. So those exercises are just the moment to look that, oh, I can do something. But then we can help anybody to look into specific details and to adapt it for individual needs. Thank you, Sid.
Thanks, Cadlin. It's a joy. I just wanted to make one more comment about leaning on allies, because Catalin and Paulin and Jeannie and I all lean on each other a whole bunch, and it's really great to have a team like this. I couldn't do most of what I do without my team, and each one of us brings something in, and that's how I actually called these folks together to develop this team. I knew all of them well, and chose people that I knew not only did I like and could work with, but people who had very specific talents and skills and abilities that I certainly don't have. And so I think that's a good thing to leave with today. And we're thinking about community. We're thinking about change. We have to grow together. We have to find the people around us that we want to be with who can help us to do that, and not try to do everything ourselves. But we sure appreciate you all being with us, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you.